Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to this month's Enrichment Series webinar. I am your host, Amir Ganad, and I'm here together with our presenter, Aaron Fetters. Now, we are especially grateful to Aaron because he has made time for us to be with us on short notice, as our original guest couldn't be available for this session. The topic of today's webinar is lessons learned on a path to data-driven marketing, where Aaron is going to share with us several of his top lessons learned as it relates to planning for, embracing, and executing data-driven marketing strategies. Now, before I introduce Aaron, I'd like to go over a few announcements about the Enrichment Series. As many of you know, we have this is a monthly series with the goal of connecting members and providing enriching content to our alums around the world. Our goal is for you to leave today's webinar having learned something new and hopefully feeling inspired. Our webinars are also recorded so that you can go back and review anything you want to listen to again or share with your friends via our P&G Alumni Network YouTube channel, which I will share with you a bit later. A bit about P&G Alumni Network and who we are. All of this is part of a greater mission of the nonprofit founded by former Procter and Gamble employees to share ideas, talents, and resources with each other and with our community and basically do philanthropy efforts. With more than 35,000 registered members and 45 chapters worldwide, the P&G Alumni Network is officially recognized and supported by P&G. We connect via global conferences, local chapters, industry events, and online content. And our nonprofit foundation supports economic empowerment initiatives in communities around the world. Now, our annual global conference is right around the corner. It is held every 2 years. It is set for October 24th through 26th in Madrid, Spain. The last conference was held in Cincinnati in October 2017 and was a huge success. It was attended by alums from all over the world and with inspiring and thought-provoking speakers and breakout sessions and workshops. We hope to see you at the next conference later this coming in October to be held at the Intercontinental in Madrid. And more information about registration can be found on the network's website at pngalums.com. And if you're registered to receive P&G Alumni Network newsletters and emails, information will be forthcoming about registration. Now, let me go over what you will see essentially on your screen. Just a quick rundown on this. This is your webinar screen. This is where you will see the content. I will, in a moment, initiate a few poll questions. You'll see the slides here, and you'll notice that you'll be muted just so we don't hear any background noise. If you have any questions, I would ask you to go ahead and type your questions in this panel. And what I will do is I will collect these questions as the host, and I will ask Aaron as many of the questions as our time allows in the end. Now, what I would like to do, if we could just take a few moments, you will see some poll questions pop up on your screen. We'll just pause for a few seconds for each of these 5 questions. If you don't mind, please answer the questions for us, and we'll take it from there. Thank you so much. I see answers are coming in. Yep, we have Asia, Europe, Latin America, and North America represented at this point. Thank you so much for that. Okay, and we have just 2 more questions about your industry that you're coming from. Very cool. And the last question, your functional expertise. Okay, thank you so much for your participation in the poll. At this time, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker. Aaron Fetters began his career with 13 years at Procter and Gamble across roles in IT, digital marketing, and CMK. He has since continued to play an expanding leadership role within the digital marketing, research, and analytics industry at large, basically through positions throughout companies such as Kellogg Company, comScore, and most recently a venture-backed startup named TruthSet. While serving as Director of Insights and Analytics at the Kellogg Company, Aaron delivered leading-edge approaches to market mix modeling, advanced digital analytics, and data-driven marketing strategy. He has since positioned himself on the solution side of data and marketing, first as the Executive Vice President for Advertisers and Agencies at comScore, and now as part of the founding team of the TruthSet company. Aaron has received multiple recognitions throughout the marketing and research industry for his achievements. He has been awarded the ARF Great Minds Game Changer Leadership Award, the Brand Innovators 40 Under 40 Midwest Class of 2014, and an iMedia 25 Marketing Leaders and Innovators Award. He has also held key roles and speaking engagements with the Advertising Research Foundation, ARF, ICOM, iMedia, Association of National Advertisers, a coalition for innovative media measurement, and other organizations. While at Kellogg, Aaron served as co-chair of the ANA Measurement Committee. So please help me welcome Aaron. Aaron, so great to have you with us.
Thank you, Amir. Thank you so much. Yeah,
Awesome.
and
So
let's see. I'll let you
I'm going to now make you our presenter. So
Okay.
we'll be seeing your slides.
Let me, and you can tell me then, Amir, if you see my full screen slide.
Yes.
All right.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Looking good.
All right.
Take it
Very
away.
good. Well, thank you so much, Amir. I really appreciate that intro. That was a very nice intro. And thank you to the P&G Alumni Network for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity. This has been a great organization. I was trying to answer those poll questions, Amir, but it only apparently allowed the attendees. But I have participated in some of the local chapter of my P&G Alumni chapter here in the Chicago area, and definitely get a lot of great value out of this organization. So thank you so much for having me, and thanks everyone for logging in this morning. I'm really glad to see a healthy audience, and appreciate you all spending the time to hear a little bit from me this morning. So I'll get started, and I'll start with who am I and what do I at least think that I know. And Amir did a great job there with my bio, so thank you for that. One of the things I'll say is first and foremost, I consider myself a P&G alumni, just like the rest of you this morning. And I have a little story that I like to tell about being a P&G alumni, which I think a lot of us can probably relate to. I actually remember when I got to Kellogg's, and I was only at Kellogg's for a few months at the time, and happened to be in a conversation with one of our very senior executives there at Kellogg's. And I remember him saying to me, I've worked with a lot of past P&Gers, and in my experience, there's really two types of former P&Gers. He said the first type, they get out of P&G and they feel like the bonds have been loosened. They are wildly free to succeed in incredible ways, to do incredible things that they maybe felt constrained to be able to do inside of P&G. And I see those people just become incredibly successful. They said the other type gets out of P&G and they have the same skill sets, but they feel like the the guardrails have been taken down and they're not really sure what to do, and they become incredibly paralyzed because his point was, and I related to this so much, his point was that P&G does such a great job of training their individuals and creating processes that drive them to success, that sometimes those processes become barriers to success and sometimes they become enablers to success. I always took that to heart, and I imagine many of you can relate to that. And I've certainly worked with also other former P&Gers that I would say I see that same example. And hopefully all of us feel like we've gotten free and we can do great things. And I've always said that I would never take back having began my career there, and it was an incredible experience to learn the type of things that P&G invests in you and take that to other places. So one thing that I'll say about the rest of my career is I went on to Kellogg's and comScore and now a company called TruthSet, is that one of the common threads throughout my career has been data. I've been very fortunate to have what I would call a non-typical career path. Even at P&G, I began in the product supply IT function and then went into interactive marketing, working on Olay and into digital CMK. But data was always at kind of the heart of everything I've done, whether it was analyzing supply chain data from SAP early on to getting to understand the Olay CRM program and how to use that to drive growth for the brand, to going to Kellogg's and really working on some innovative capabilities in programmatic and digital analytics, eventually then taking that to comScore and helping to drive growth of their analytic capabilities with major brands throughout the world. And now I'm at a company called TruthSet, which I'll tell you more about later, but it is entirely based on the idea of data and finding truth in data. So data has always been kind of a core thread to all of my career, and hopefully, yeah, I've learned some things along the way that I can pass on, and that would be my intention here this morning. But by no means do I feel like I'm even an expert in this area. Data is something that just continues to grow every day, and it's hard to ever consider yourself an expert. I like to always start off any conversation about data-driven marketing with these two statements. And the first is that the fundamentals of marketing have not changed. I think we get very hung up in, well, what's going on with marketing today? How is marketing different? How do we think about that? And the reality is the fundamentals of marketing have not changed, and it's very important to keep that in mind. But the expectations and environment in which you compete has. So what do I mean by those things? I mean that brands still need to break through, they need to create awareness, and they need to drive behavior. That's the fundamentals of marketing. Those things are the same today as they've ever been. But the environment in which you compete as a marketer or a brand has drastically changed, and that's largely driven by the advances in data and technology, some of which we'll talk about. But marketing's always been at least data informed, if not data driven. So I like to say, example, imagine that you're a small brand selling soap regionally back in the late 1800s, and you decide to run a newspaper ad. And you're certainly going to respond to any results in sales that you see right after that newspaper article has run or that newspaper ad has run. That's just a very simple example of being at least data informed. And we've always been data informed, but I think what's different today is the way that data is being applied, the speed at which data is being applied and turned into action really is the difference and what drives how you need to compete in today's organizations. I like to say that there's kind of three areas I think leaders need to consider in order to be successful in this new environment. One is to build the organization, 2 is to build the capabilities, and 3 is to build the connections necessary to evolve to ensure that you're going to have success in this digitally enabled and data-driven marketplace. So throughout some of the lessons learned I'll go through, I'll try to reference back to what do I mean by building the organization, the capabilities, and the connections. But I think all 3 of these areas are vitally important to think about if you are a leader in the marketing space today and trying to figure out how to succeed with data-driven marketing. So with that, I'll go into my lessons learned. And I guess just a little note here, I did not go into this with any intention of develop a top 10 list or 3 big lessons learned or anything like that. I just thought I would start to write down things that came to mind as important lessons as I've gone throughout my career. It turns out I came up with 8. That's a bit arbitrary. Maybe I could have stretched it to 10 had I wanted. I don't know, 8 seemed to be an unusual number of lessons learned, so I figured maybe it would be memorable. And I'm going to go through 8 different lessons learned, and talk to me later if you want to add a couple, and we'll get to the top 10. But number 1, I start with this, which is begin with a purpose in mind. And I think we all know there's a pretty familiar former CMO of P&G who's almost has literally written the book on building brands with purpose, based on purpose. And it's kind of the same thing with data-driven marketing. You really have to start with having a purpose in mind, have an objective. What are you trying to achieve? And then develop KPIs of success to inform you as to your progress towards that objective. So I recently made a post to LinkedIn in which I stated, I don't think data is the new oil, as many are suggesting. It's more like water, as in water everywhere, but not a drop to drink. And what I mean is, there's just been this explosion of data, and I see so many instances where brands are beginning to collect data really simply for the sake of data, with no real plan of how to turn such a commodity into value. And when you do that, data becomes just more noise than it does informative. And I would tell people, start by determining what is your objective for saying that you're a data-driven marketing organization. And from there, begin to define KPIs that are very clear and that will inform as to your success moving forward. I will say from my experience that quite often the objective that I hear is efficiency. In other words, eliminating waste. Data-driven marketing allows you to eliminate waste. It allows you to reduce costs, or CPMs in the world of media. But that's just one objective, and I don't think that we should really stop there. I think the bigger picture objective when I think about data-driven marketing would be something like relevance. And specifically, how can data-driven marketing and a data-driven strategy make your brand more relevant to your consumers? Now, this can go as far as something like personalization. And I think the Marriott Bonvoy brand is a very good program and brand as an example of doing this. I've heard some of their leaders speak recently about the advantages of bringing together the data assets from the Starwood loyalty program with the Marriott loyalty program. And they're doing some very interesting things to really personalize the experience of Marriott Bonvoy for their members. So I think it's a great example of smart data-driven marketing to drive something as intimate as personalization. But on the other hand, it can be as simple as just getting a good email marketing strategy right. I was recently in a meeting with someone from Live Nation, someone who actually had some real responsibility for the data at Live Nation. Live Nation, being an outlet for music and performers and booking tickets to concerts. And I remember him commenting to me, I work here in data and I go to concerts all the time, and yet every email I get, it seems like they have no idea, we have no idea what performers I like and what concerts I would be interested in going to. And so he is acknowledging that they still hadn't even used data to really figure out something as simple as a great email marketing campaign. And that's my point of having data alone is not going to ensure that you have success. You have to have an objective. You have to be able to measure that and understand the KPIs that will tell you, are we having some success in achieving what it is we're trying to achieve with our data-driven strategy? So I would say consider relevance and consider always having an objective in mind. Second big thing that I've learned is this idea of reserve the right to get smarter. Now, that's a phrase that I will credit to one of my managers at Kellogg's for coming up with. And when he came up with it, I always sort of joked with him. I said, well, this is just your excuse for any time that you're wrong. You're going to say, well, I'm wrong, but I reserve the right to get smarter. And I think there's some truth in that. But really, when you take a step back, what this is really referencing is the idea of taking a test and learn approach. And I think that that's super important in the world of data-driven, because none of us have it completely figured out. But taking a test and learn approach allows you to get smarter as you go. And I think it's, if I go back to point one, it's very important that you maintain your objective, but it's also important that you're willing to pivot tactics when necessary. So I'll give you an example. When I was at comScore, I fortunately had the opportunity to work with a lot of very large brands, a lot of CPG brands, and there was one in particular who was getting very heavy into data-driven, maybe over their heads, but getting very heavy into it. And they were continually testing alternative targeting strategies, trying to figure out how do we really define an audience segment through data. So if you think about, for those of you who've ever been involved in defining a marketing segment, that's, we had a way at P&G where we defined who our target audience was, and we would come up with lots of great descriptors and even give her a name and, almost an entire persona. Well, in the world of data-driven marketing, that becomes more interesting, because now I have to translate all those different descriptions into some attributes of data, attributes that I can go out and acquire and add to my data stack and then utilize to activate my messaging towards that consumer, right? And this particular brand would continually test different combinations of attributes, data attributes, to see which one generated the most response from an audience. And each test allowed them to get smarter and move them closer to the results that they really desired to achieve. So I thought that was a very smart approach, and it took some time to get where they wanted, but they were constantly learning. And conversely, as you think about even just technology evolving, that as technology evolves, consumer behaviors evolve. That means that as a marketer, you have to continue, if you continue to do the same thing, you're going to become less effective, right? So a great example is the current shift that we see in TV viewing behavior, where we're going from more linear TV behavior in nature, meaning that we're viewing it as it runs over the air, towards streaming, over the top, connected devices. That is really the transition that we're seeing in the world of media right now, that the time spent with streaming content is growing rapidly. And as a marketer, you have to get smarter about how you take advantage of that to reach your consumer, continue to reach your consumer in more and more effective ways. So I really go back to, I love this idea of reserve the right to get smarter. Yes, it does mean that I'm going to be wrong at times, and it does seem like a bit of an excuse, but in reality, it's a great way to say, I'm taking a test and learn approach, and I'm going to continue to improve upon the things that I do. All right. Let's see. Number 3, and this one's personally close to me as the measurement guy that I seem to have become throughout my career. I say, buy that which you can measure. And measurement truly does ensure accountability, and it leads to learning. As we were just talking about, reserve the right to get smarter. It's hard to get smarter if I'm not measuring that which I'm doing. So a few things, a few examples here. Maybe some of you are familiar with a P&G initiative that was called Hawkeye. Hawkeye, if you're not familiar with it, was really the first implementation of what's known as programmatic advertising for a big non-direct response brands, meaning it was P&G was stepping their toes into buying media almost in the same manner that you would buy stocks on a stock exchange. They were bidding for media in real time, and it was a very different buying approach at the time. This was the mid 2000s, let's call it. And I can remember I was in the digital CMK function at that time, And I remember my manager coming to me and he said, we're going to test this new way of buying media, and we need a measurement plan to measure whether or not this is successful. And so I need you to put together this measurement plan. And it was very interesting. And so I did, and we said, well, what's the difference in this way of buying media? So, well, it's less about buying properties and more about buying the people who we think we need to reach. And so we put together a measurement plan. Sure enough, we measured it. And I guess one thing that we learned was that going back to the objectives, it was in fact more efficient. We did not necessarily see it be more effective at that time, but it was indeed just as effective while also being more efficient. But to me, it was a really great example that P&G has gone on to be a leader in that space, but they started it with a very clear notion that they needed to measure what they were doing. If we're going to test something this big and this new and this different, we're going to be well sure that we're measuring the success of it. And I really carried that idea on with me, that lesson on with me as I joined Kellogg's. And that became, in fact, another one of our principles or our sayings, which was, if I can't measure it, I won't buy it. Now that idea at first sounded well-intentioned, but I think some of our media partners didn't really believe us when we said, if I can't measure it, I won't buy it. So in fact, I vividly recall a phone call we had to have with one of the largest media companies in the world who had been a Kellogg's partner for 50 years or so. And we got on the phone. We had told the media company, look, you're not accepting the type of digital measurement that we want to do. And so if you're not going to allow that type of measurement, then we're going to move our investment elsewhere. So one of the vice presidents for that company got on the phone with us, and the conversation generally went something like, come on, guys, you're not really going to do this. You're not really going to move all this money after years of a partnership and investment. And we said, well, we'll give you 2 weeks to figure out how to implement the measurement that we're asking for. And after that, we're going to move the investment. Really? Yes, really, we're going to. And there was a bit of silence on the line, disbelief, but he finally acknowledged that, okay, you're serious about this. And indeed, within 2 weeks, they figured out how to implement the type of measurement that we were asking for, and we began to measure them. And funny enough, I'll tie this back to previous learnings. It was through that measurement that company, in fact, learned how to perform better, because we were now holding them accountable and providing data that led to learning that helped them to drive better results and continue to be a very valuable partner for Kellogg's. So all of these tied together very well, I think. But the idea was, if I can't measure it, I won't buy it. And I would still stick to that today as I think about data-driven marketing. So number 4, data and marketing needs storytellers. So I say here, data scientists and CMOs, for example, speak very different languages. And I've always said that data not often tells you what, but decision makers need to know why. So this lesson relates back to that idea of having the right organizational pieces. We talked about organization, connections, capabilities. This is about having the right organizational pieces. In this case, those with the talent for turning data into inspiring stories. I will say one of the many valuable trainings I received at P&G, as I'm sure we've all been through many of those days offsite or even week-long trainings. But for me, one of the most memorable ones was led by a gentleman named Paul Smith in CMK, who literally wrote a book called Lead with a Story. And as a researcher, Paul realized that just having data was very often not enough. In order to drive action and influence others, you had to really be able to tell a great story out of that data. And I carried that with me throughout the rest of my career. In fact, I remember as I started to lead a new organization at Kellogg's, I bought everyone a copy of that book because I felt like it was such an important idea to say, we have to be able to take the data and the insights that we're developing and turn them into stories that will inspire others to take action where we need. My best personal example of applying this learning came within my first 3 months at Kellogg's. I was there to, implement a data analytic strategy, and I was asked by my manager to prepare and present to our CMO how are we going to do this? How are we going to go about measuring all this new investment we were starting to place into the digital and data-driven marketing spaces? So my plan included an ask for about 7 figures worth of budget toward analytics, which had not existed in the past. And add to this that the CMO was more of an old school marketing guy. He was a bit bombastic and excitable, but not the most technically fluent. So I figured I needed a story to get this across to him, why we needed to do this. Now, at the time, this was 2011, and if you remember, the book and the movie Moneyball was just in theaters, and it was very much in the public conscious. And so I thought, I'm going to build a story around the idea of Moneyball. And what I told the CMO is that we wanted to play Moneyball with media. And for anyone who's not familiar with that story, it's really the story of how the game of baseball fundamentally changed. It was led by some of the analysts and general managers of the Oakland Athletics, who figured out, really, as we scout players and build teams, it's better, instead of scouting players for things like home runs and RBIs and big stats like that, it's actually more impactful to build a team based off of metrics that matter, metrics that are more indicative of team success. So they started to look at metrics like on base percentage and things like wins above replacement. And I, told the CMO, we need to do the same thing with media. We've historically bought premium media properties because they seem like the natural play and they seem sexy. But in reality, or something like click-through rates as a metric in the digital world seems like a big home run. But in reality, we should be looking at more advanced metrics like percentage of impressions delivered on target, or percentage of impressions that are viewable, or the frequency and getting control of the percent of impressions within a given frequency range. All these much more nuanced attributes that we wanted to begin to analyze and optimize towards. Well, I would say it was within about 30 seconds of relating this all back to Moneyball, he got a big grin on his face and he said, "I love it." He totally understood what I was trying to say, totally understood how I was trying to take Kellogg into sort of a new generation of thinking about media and metrics. And I ended up getting not only the budget that I needed, he invited me up to his house later that weekend to have a bottle of wine next to the lake he lived on. So I felt like it was very successful. But I believe it all came back to being able to tell a good story and translate something that could have been very data heavy and centric and almost boring to something that was very relatable. And I would encourage anyone, to continue to think about, how do we do this and how do we have the right organizations that can help to do this, so not just be able to run the data and analysis, but then turn it into something influential and impactful. All right, number 5. So I hope many of you remember the TLA dictionaries. I remember receiving a hard copy printed version of the P&G TLA dictionary, the 3-letter acronym dictionary. Well, I know we all thought P&G was full of TLAs. This data-driven marketing space is perhaps even more full of TLAs and has just gone above and beyond all efforts to create them. It's full of 3-letter acronyms, and you see things like CRM, SSP, DSP, DMP, CDP, etc. And what I would say is maybe the hardest TLA to find is a UVP, a unique value proposition. So here's where I say this relates back to capabilities, finding the right capabilities. I don't intend to go through the description of all these different TLAs here during this call. I'm happy to follow up offline or after the call around what some of these are. But what I do want to emphasize is that be cautious of all these different supposed variations in capabilities and platforms, because in reality there tends to be minimal variation. In fact, I would suggest, and have been exposed to the fact, that a lot of times new platform naming conventions and acronyms get made up really just to solicit investor interest quite often. And so as you get into this space and you start to drill in on what capabilities do I really need versus what capabilities are available in the market, I think it's super imperative to dive deep on, well, what's really unique and valuable about these capabilities? What is there something that really separates a CDP from a DMP? And what is that? And is it something that's going to add value to my capabilities, right? So I would say my advice is be very focused and diligent on defining your clear needs as an organization, going back all the way to principle number one. What's your objective and what are the KPIs that'll tell you that you're reaching it? So if you plan to issue, many times brands will issue RFIs, requests for information. And if you're going to do that, I would say be very clear and specific in the questions that you ask vendors about their capabilities. I would say take no response at face value and follow up on anything that sounds suspicious, because it probably is. You've heard the phrase, I'm sure many times, fake it till you make it. And I would suggest that that's a very real behavior, particularly in this world of startups and spaces that are creating some of these new platforms. Now, fake it till you make it is not necessarily a bad thing. As new capabilities are being developed, there's a bit of, hey, I need you to trust me. We're building something great here, and it's not fully baked yet, but you can see my plan and my roadmap, and we're going to get there. And you, as a marketer, could be a key partner to help me do that. That's okay. In other cases, you'll go into some of these RFIs, RFPs, and find that you've just been fed an entire load of crap, because they're trying to suggest that just because they have a different TLA, they actually have some unique value, and really there's nothing there. So I would just caution everyone to be extremely diligent as you go into understanding what's really truly different about this platform, and does it contain the capabilities that are going to set me up to be unique and valuable with what I'm trying to achieve in terms of my objective. And that one actually leads right into the next lesson learned. Great people are always better than great technology. And this became another one of the principles I think we honed in on at Kellogg's. We really started to see that this is true both internally and externally. From an external standpoint, we said, look, we want to seek partners, not vendors. And we quite often found that we were making choices based much more on the people behind the capability than on the capabilities themselves. And this is where I said this is the third part of make sure you have the right connections in place, because you're building an ecosystem not only of technology, but an ecosystem of expertise and intelligence out there. And so I would encourage you really think about seeking partners who, that aren't just vendors. They really contain, you're looking for great people you can trust, you can count on. And that's where you can then trust them to say something like, we're going to fake it till we make it, versus if I'm just relying on what I believe is great technology, then I maybe am going to miss the boat and miss out on altogether. That talent should go both ways. It has to be both internal and external, and it takes all types. I say quite often that technology can get ahead of people and strategy. I'll give an example. I remember at Kellogg's, we had done a pretty good job of putting various capabilities in place. We had the platforms that we were using. We were using a lot of different data types to be what we thought was pretty smart. And one of our biggest brands, the team came up to us and they said, hey, we have this great new campaign where we've defined 4 unique segments within the target consumer that we think you guys can help us reach, because through all of your data, we can, very specifically reach these 4 different segments uniquely. And so we want you to help us do that. We said, okay, well, yeah, we can probably do that. What's the message that you have? What's the messaging you have for these 4 different segments? What's the difference that you want to highlight? Oh, well, there is no difference. We just have one message. And that to me it's just a great example of the technology getting ahead of the people and the strategy, because we said, Well, if you really only have one thing to say to 4 different groups, you should probably just target women because you're not saying anything different. And that's where just don't lose the common sense human element of all this data-driven marketing. Really think about, if I'm going to create different targets, different segments, if I'm going to spend the money to invest in data, then let's make sure that we have something to say, we have something unique to offer them, and that we're going to be able to measure the impact of that uniqueness specifically against those segments. Otherwise, again, we're just doing it for the sake of doing it. It really makes no sense and probably wasting company investment. All right, number 7, and this speaks to kind of the future of this space. I would say it's all data driven, or it will be. So we think about data driven. I think a lot of times what you're thinking about is just digital, what we've considered digital marketing and mobile marketing, or maybe even email marketing. But the reality is, if you kind of look and pay attention, so much of the place where marketers' investment is going to need to be spent is digital or data driven in nature. Out of home is becoming, digital out of home is growing rapidly, and that's beginning to be data driven. There are lots of incredible examples of brands doing interesting things with digital out of home. This OTT, which stands for over the top, or maybe you hear it referred to as connected TV, I would say that's probably the number one thing I hear both brands and particularly media agencies talking about right now is what should our OTT strategy be? How should we be reaching consumers in a streaming environment? That's becoming very data driven. Point of sale is data driven, personalization is data driven, and even this idea of advanced linear TV. So I spoke about television viewing earlier, and the idea that linear TV used to just be, well, look, if you're watching CBS, everyone watching CBS sees the same ad. That's not even necessarily true anymore. Even in linear television, some of the providers now are offering ways for advertisers to target households, specific households, during a linear TV broadcast based on data. All that's based on data. And so the idea here would be, you really cannot afford to ignore data and capabilities and the evolution of these things. And if you ignore it now, you get behind. I've always loved the idea of setting aside a portion of your budget for test and learn. It doesn't need to be all of it, doesn't need to be a huge amount, but you should always be looking for opportunities to test new things. In fact, one of the things that I encourage is, as we talked about earlier, if one of your objectives for data-driven marketing is efficiency, and you believe that you're beginning to save money in one place, then I would encourage taking that and reinvesting it into a test in another place. If I'm now saving money because I'm smarter with things like viewability in online advertising, well, let me take that money saved and reinvest it into testing OTT or connected television. I need to understand what can I do with my consumer in that space? How can I extend my reach against the desired consumer? Those are all things that I would be encouraging brands to learn. And always be learning with everything that you do. I think you've heard that on several of these lessons learned. I'm very big on the idea that whatever you're doing, make sure that you're always learning. And that takes us to my final lesson learned here, which I'll admit and acknowledge now. I'll give a bit of a plug, but I'm going to try to keep it a very small plug. The truth can be hard to find. I think we all realize this, but in this world of data-driven marketing, there is a tremendous amount of uncertainty, error, whatever you want to call it, in data itself. In fact, I've got a few of the statistics up here that are taken from some different studies. Only 29% of data on consumers as a whole is more than 50% accurate. There's an estimate that poor data costs brands an average of 6% in annual revenue. And the reality is that bad data undermines everything from your analytics to your acquisition of new consumers to your retention of those consumers and eventually your entire brand equity. This is a reality that I lived with on the marketer side, understanding that, as we put these analytics plans in place, they were really aimed at finding the worst case scenario, right? So if we said we were targeting women 25 to 54, what percent of the time do we actually hit women 25 to 54? And the amazing thing is, if you don't pay attention to this, many of the data sets out there that supposedly help you reach something as simple as age and gender are at best 50% accurate. And then when you think about the more advanced segmentation that brands are trying to do, whether it be to reach auto intenders or someone with a pet in the household or any other very specific segment, the data quickly falls apart. And it falls apart for a number of reasons. There's errors at the source of the data. There are errors as the data gets turned into some lookalike model where you have an assumed data point that looks like another one. And then there's errors in things like cross-device manipulation, where we try to take data from one device and say, okay, we can help you find people across other devices. So lots of opportunity to create error in data. That was truly what drove me to where I am today. I had a real passion for this idea and had come across a couple of individuals who were starting a company called TruthSet based on the idea that we want to find truth in data. And I think that we're going to see a lot more of that. There's been even some new research released I saw just this week from Forrester talking about marketers' concern about the trust and truth in data. And I believe that the future is going to be how do we determine what's true in data? How do we get to accuracy? How do we eliminate error? And I would advise anyone who's getting into this space be very diligent about examining the accuracy of data. Don't take it for granted that data is accurate. Make sure you have a plan in place. Back to measurement, measure the efficacy of the data that you're utilizing and acquiring, because there's a lot of error out there, and it can be it can cause some pretty big problems if you don't pay attention to it. So that is my final lessons learned, and one that I have, as I said, turned into a career decision for myself. And hopefully it's helpful to each of you on the phone today to have heard some of these things. I really thank you again for the time, and I think I'm here about right on time and wanted to leave a little bit for questions.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Aaron. And you've certainly bottled up a bunch of, years of experience into this webinar, and we really appreciate that. We do have a few questions that have come in, and I'm going to go ahead and just address at least as many of those as we possibly can. First of all, your Moneyball example, someone made a comment that it was really superb and a superb case, particularly as it relates to using right KPIs for measure success. So that's great. One question that has come in is, what are the biggest challenges that you've faced in transformation of organizations on the client side into data-driven organizations?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of it has to do with just legacy ways of doing things, right? And anyone who was at P&G for a while knows that there's a sort of a P&G, I would say, is a good two-edged sword, example of a double-edged sword, where they are always pushing new innovation, like things like Hawkeye, we talked about, but at the same time, some of those very well-established processes often got in the way. And I think I've seen that across many companies as I've worked with them at comScore or inside of Kellogg's. The legacy processes, legacy ways of doing things, legacy mindsets are quite often the biggest barrier. I think that's ties very well into the idea of like the Moneyball story, because you have to be able to communicate with some of those historical decision makers in a way that makes them think a little bit differently about, well, why should I change? And really, it's finding that imperative for change is key. We talk a lot about finding a burning platform. what's going to happen, what's the opportunity cost of not investing in this space, right? And so sometimes we talk about how don't get caught up in how cool and how neat and how cutting edge some of these capabilities are. Instead, just talk very fundamentally about, if we don't invest in this now, here's the burning platform we're standing on. This is what's going to happen. This is the risk that we run. That's often been, some of the most effective ways of communicating it. And again, not trying to be extremist, just trying to be realistic about, I think the idea, coming with data, like I said, about consumer behavior. When you show some of the key decision makers that, hey, look, 10, 15 years ago, here's how many people we could reach with a traditional television buy. Today, here's how many people we reach with that traditional television buy, and it's drastically different. But if we are smart about mixing in something like a streaming buy in addition to our traditional buy, now all of a sudden we're not only reaching the same amount of people, we're doing it in a more impactful environment, right? Telling those kind of stories, I think, is what's been most successful.
Yeah, I mean, just like any other change, if you have the best tools and the right skills, if you don't have the right mindset, I think if you don't compel people to really want to change, then they're still going to stick with their legacy systems. So let me address one other question, Aaron. What kind of measurement and the ways to go about measuring do you recommend for buying non-digital media, especially newspapers, magazines, TV, or radio? Are circulation and ratings still the right data to look for?
Yeah, at Kellogg's, I used a really fundamental, what we called the measurement framework, and I tried to keep it very, very simple. And the framework went like this: do I have the right message that reaches the right audience and has the right impact? And then within those three big buckets, you could start to break it down to metrics, to KPIs, right? Having the right message, that's the creative side. I could spend an entire call on, I think, the importance of understanding your creative and getting your message right. But reaching the right audience, this is a fundamental one. Just to say, even in traditional non-digital media, do I understand who I'm reaching and how many of them I'm reaching and how often I'm reaching them, or how many times I'm reaching them? It's amazing to me how we get caught up in advanced metrics and forget something as fundamental as reach and frequency, and how important reach and frequency are. We did several kind of macro studies from our market mix results at Kellogg's, and it always came back to one of the primary drivers of success would be reach and frequency. Having enough unique reach and reaching people frequently enough, but not too much, to have an impact. So look at, whether it's circulation and ratings, I would absolutely look at those, but I'd want to understand, what audience are they reaching? Is it the audience that I intend? Obviously, it's very different for a large CPG brand versus a more niche brand or a financial brand or something like that. Understand the audience that you're reaching, understanding how many of them and at what frequency. Those are very fundamental. And then there's lots of ways to go about measuring, am I having the right impact? From the very old school survey research, which is still alive and well, to behavioral tracking and other things like that. There's some very advanced stuff that I would always be happy to talk about offline. But I think don't never lose sight of those fundamental type metrics around reach, frequency, impact, things like that.
Yeah, as you mentioned, the fundamentals really haven't changed, so we want to make sure that we keep track of those.
That's right.
Right, and so we have just a couple of minutes left for just one final question, and that is, what is your experience with brand prime prospects or personas and digital personas being developed for digital marketing in addition to those?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think on that question, I go back to, I've witnessed most of us try to get too smart for our own good in that space. And here's what I mean about that. Just because we can do something doesn't mean we always should. And even P&G acknowledged this about a year and a half, 2 years ago, when they talked about, like, we were doing all this very, very specific targeting on Facebook because let's be honest, Facebook is a platform where you can go in as an advertiser and select so many different attributes about a consumer and say, I really want to hone in on this very specific audience. And at P&G, we often, became enamored about defining an audience or consumer more and more granularly, right? And what we would end up doing is we did that to the detriment of, back to what I said, a reach. And you forget that, I'll take a Kellogg example. Sometimes we would forget that everyone has a mouth at Kellogg's, right? Everyone has the opportunity to eat cereal. And we would become so enamored with the idea of defining at a very granular level who our consumer was and who we thought this niche target was, that you forget that, yeah, but you're missing, there's a difference between spill and waste, right? Waste would be if I advertised, to someone without a mouth in that example, but spillage is just reaching people who are still open to my brand, but maybe haven't bought it. So we started to do a lot of buyer graphics. I know a lot of CPG brands are using buyer graphics as a data set where they look at heavy category buyers, heavy brand buyers, things like that. I found the most impactful way to do that was to say, look, as long as you've walked down the cereal aisle in the past 12 months, I'm probably okay hitting you. Right now, I might want to ideally hit the people who are either heavy buyers of my brand or my top competitive brand, but at least if you've walked down that aisle in the past 12 months. Now, if you haven't even walked down the cereal aisle in the past 12 months, all right, maybe I'm having to invest too much time and money to get you into the aisle, and it's not worth it necessarily. But if you have, I'm open to you. I don't consider that waste. And sure, I'll spend some time trying to hit the heavy brand buyers, but don't get overly caught up on that. That would be my big advice there is, don't allow us, just because we can define things so granularly doesn't always mean we should.
Super. Thank you so much, Aaron. This has truly been valuable, and we appreciate your time. There are a few announcements that I'd like to make, and just to make sure that everybody is aware, once again, we record these webinars, and you can view them on our YouTube channel. Better yet, when you're there, if you could just subscribe to the channel, you will receive a notice of the new videos. We would really encourage you to get involved. There are a number of ways for you to get involved. Sign up for updates at pngalums.com. Support the foundation. Go to pgalumnifoundation.org. You could partner with us in a variety of ways, sponsoring different things, pngalums.com/sponsor. And finally, you could volunteer, start or join a chapter, or share your thoughts at hello@pgalums.com. Now, our next webinar is on future-proofing retirement. Our presenters will be Harry Nair and Colton Heward-Mills. And this next webinar will take place on October 8th, 2019 at 9 a.m. Eastern Time, and we hope that you can join us. Once again, this is Amir Ganad, your host, and I'd like to once again thank Aaron for sharing his wisdom with us, and I'd like to thank you, the attendees, for joining us, and I wish you a great week and much success and fulfillment going forward.